Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 2 of Nature of the Business podcast with YGN. We're happy to be back today. So last time we chatted about me and my background, and today I want to talk a little bit about David, our COO. David also happens to be my brother. Welcome.
Thank you.
So let's jump right in. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, where should we start? My name is David, and I live in Austin, Texas. I am a relatively new transplant to Austin. I moved here during COVID. And before that, I lived in New York for about 15 years. And before that, I went to school in Boston at Boston College. And then I grew up in New Jersey, in Trenton, New Jersey, with Monique and the rest of our family. I'm married, so I am a husband, and I have very excited to say we have our first kid on the way in August. So all of that is good stuff. And so what else? My work at YGN specifically is just really around helping the brand grow in whatever way that means. Most of the time that takes the form of marketing. Sometimes that takes the form of, if we got a fundraise, we can do that. If we need to think about operations and ways that we can streamline processes, we do that. But my work is just here supporting Monique and helping the brand become what it's supposed to be. Yeah, it's been fun.
And what do you hope that people take away from this podcast?
Yeah, I hope that I think that there are two parts to it. The first part is that brands there are people behind, consumers are people, and there are people behind brands and behind companies. And we all, have things that we want to see in the world. And so I hope this kind of creates a line of communication from, what we're thinking at YGN to our customers and the people who support us on a daily basis. And I also hope that the work that we do, we have been really fortunate in that there are not many people who have scaled brands in the ethnic beauty space, ethnic space in general this quickly. And as well as, especially Monique as a CEO, Black female CEO, having raised venture funding, that's also rare air. And so a lot of times these experiences, not a lot of people get to have them, Black or not Black, ethnic or not ethnic, female, not female. And our goal is just to share these experiences with people so that you might learn from some of our mistakes, and also to know that it's totally possible for you to do it as well. And so those are really the two things I hope that we can achieve with this podcast. And then I think finally, I know I said two, but last week at the end of our conversation, we talked a little bit about just giving space for you and I to just riff on ideas that we have and opportunities and things like that. And so I think this is a cool way to do that. So
awesome. Yeah, I'm excited about that too. We talked a lot about your work at YGN, but I want to get into your background. So what was your education like?
My education was very atypical. Our parents always thought about education first, and that was like the number one priority growing up. And so they worked really hard and they thought that the best education came from private schools where we lived. And so we always went to private schools, and from 0 to 6th grade, I probably didn't have more than 15 people in my class. And my 6th grade class had 6 people in it. So really small schools, a lot of attention, fortunately. And also our school was 2 houses down from our house in Trenton, New Jersey. I think we got a lot of attention. We got good education, and that was really the driver. And then I went to all boys Catholic high school just outside of Philly in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. And then I went to school in Boston. So I went to Boston College. And so when I went to Boston College, I majored in information systems and marketing. So there's a business school in Boston College called CSOM, Carroll School of Management. And at the time, Boston College wasn't really that strong in computer science. And before that, I had been a self-taught engineer. So I built my first website when I was 14, and the internet was just coming online. And this was in, I don't know, it was probably in 1995 or so. And so I built my first website. I was always really interested in that stuff. And so when I got to Boston College, they had an information systems degree and a very small computer science program, but I was interested in business and technology. So that's what I got my degree in. So that was my education. I think I wasn't ever the best student in the world. I was probably, I don't know, I was like, okay. And that there were certainly people who were smarter than me. And I distinctly remember that being in school, there was always stuff that I was interested in studying that wasn't ever covered on the test, or the things that were most important to answer in the test. I never really answered those things. So I think that I always felt a little bit out of place in traditional school. And so I did okay, but I think that looking back, it's probably why I do the work that I do now.
So once you got out of school, what was your first job out of college?
My first job out of school was a company called TechTarget. And TechTarget, it was actually a pretty bad economy in 2000, and I guess it was 2003 now. And it was post.com. So the .com crash happened in 1999 to 2000. And I wanted to go into tech. And so there were lots of tech startups on campus, but then all those lost funding and they all went away. And so it was really hard to get a job in tech. And there was a guy who I met at BC, and he ended up becoming somewhat of a mentor to me. Let's say it was Nigel Melville. There was a business operations class that he taught. And he came from Silicon Valley. He had a tech startup, and he told the story about how Silicon Valley was and all this. And I was like, that's amazing. And so I knew that I wanted to go to work. After he told that story and I went through that class, I knew I wanted to go to work for a tech startup. And the only job I could get was a sales job at a company called TechTarget. And TechTarget they were a website where people who were in the IT profession or technology profession could come and learn about networking or computer networking and those types of things. And so their business model was an advertising business model. And so I sold advertising programs to people, IT managers, or to software and networking companies. So if you were Cisco Systems and you had a server and you wanted to sell it into the organization, and the person who was making the IT, the CTO, had to make a decision on what servers they got, Cisco would have to advertise so that those people said, oh, I want to buy Cisco. And so we put together programs that basically there were content, and people consumed the content, and then advertisers sponsored the content. And that was really the job. And again, I wasn't a very good salesperson, honestly. I didn't really sell a lot. I was there for maybe about a year, and I knew that wasn't the work that I actually wanted to be doing. I didn't want to be doing sales. I didn't want to be cold calling people. That wasn't it was good work because I learned a lot of great skills about communication and about navigating, helping understanding how to get people to buy into whatever product you're selling. But I didn't enjoy it. And so I was there for probably less than a year, and I ended up leaving to go to my second job. That was the first job at school.
And then your next job was?
My next job was a company called, at the time they were called Alcatel, and we changed our name to FlyCell during that time. And so at that time, that was a really interesting time because mobile technology, mobile phones were just taking off here in the US. But at the time, Europe, the mobile technology in Europe was ahead of the US. And Alcatel, ACOTEL, they were an Italian-based company, and they said, hey, we're going to bring our European technology to the US. And the products that they had were a couple products. The first one was a text message subscription service where they partnered with the Vatican to get the rights from the Vatican, and they had a Pope message, which the Pope, people subscribe for $10 a month on their cell phone, or maybe it was even $1 a day or something. Yeah.
The Pope was sending messages to people?
Yep. Through Alcatel. Yeah. So they had the deal with the Pope to send the text message to people. People would pay like $1 a day or $1 a month. I can't remember what it was. Either $10 a month or $1 a day to get a message from the Pope. And so we were bringing that technology here. And at the time, ringtones were also really big. And so they wanted to launch ringtones in the US. And I saw the job, I applied for it, and I didn't have any experience at all in web development. I had done it for fun, but I had one internship. And so I didn't know if I was going to get the job. But what I did was I came home that night after the interview, and I stayed up all night. I made a website as an example website of the website that I would build when I got the job. And I ended up getting the job. That was really how I got into like tech startups specifically. We were doing some of the first ringtone deals with Sony. So I was like at 21 or 22, I was like on the calls with lawyers, like talking about I didn't know anything about legal anything. And so you're just on calls with lawyers talking about how should we license these ringtones? What are the rights? What percentages do you want? And so that was really my first foray into being, I always wanted to start small businesses, but that was my first foray into being like, okay, we're really making all this stuff up right now. And to the extent that you can show up and just do it confidently and do it in a way where, especially at times where nobody knows what's going on, there's real opportunities entrepreneurially. So that was my second job out of college. It was that. And it was definitely I wasn't the founder or anything like that, but I was the second or third employee in the US office. It was very formative.
I know that because I'm your sister, I know that you've done a lot of work as an entrepreneur. So can you tell me a little bit about that background and the types of companies that you've built?
Yeah. I think my experience as an entrepreneur has really, I think it's a more typical experience as an entrepreneur than most people would. That you read in the news or you read on the internet. There's been a lot of okay experiences and some really bad experiences. So I went to that second job after school, and then I ended up leaving. I got recruited to go to another company which also sold ringtones, and I was their first employee there as well. I got recruited, and that's how I ended up down in New York. Was that I think the parent company of Alcatel closed their office, and I guess they brought over some people directly from Italy, and they were opening an office in New York. And they said, hey, we want to keep you. We're shutting down the Boston office. And so I moved down to New York, and that's how I landed there. And within 6 months of being in New York, I met somebody either reached out to me or something happened where I met who was then the founder of a company called Thumbplay. And Thumbplay was another ringtone company. And so I was the first employee at Thumbplay. Thumbplay went on to be sold for hundreds of millions of dollars to Clear Channel. It was like turned into the iHeartRadio app. But at Thumbplay, it was a similar crazy experience where like the first week there, the CEO was like, hey, I want you to fly over to Portugal and talk to our engineering team that we have over there. So I didn't know anything. And I guess the week after Thanksgiving I don't speak any Portuguese. I don't know. I'm 23 years old flying over to Portugal. And I was probably a little bit over my head at that time, but Thumbplay was a fun experience because we did go through at the age of like 25, the CEO at the time, he was like, hey, who do you know is in marketing? And I had a friend, his name is Brian. He's the only person I knew in New York City who did marketing. I was like, this guy. And so so it came over, and the CEO goes, bring Brian in. And he worked at the agency. And the agency came in, and the CEO was like, I don't like the agency that much, but I like Brian. Let's get Brian in here. And so we hired Brian, and Brian's a friend. And so that was cool because you just start to see at 23 and 25, oh, like this is how you just call him in, and then you do this thing. And And Thumbplay grew really quickly. We raised a bunch of money. We brought in, at the time, there was a direct marketing, like back in the day, you could buy these CDs for a penny, right? Like you could get like 20 CDs for a penny from Columbia House and like a bunch of different companies, and it would be a subscription. And at the time, I didn't know that much about just kind of direct marketing, but Thumbplay brought in someone who was from one of those other subscription companies. And then that guy, he built the entire infrastructure for marketing. And I ended up being in business development. So I was doing these ringtone deals, these license deals, and looking at MySpace for how we could leverage the artists on MySpace for Thumbplay. What was our MySpace marketing strategy? So I am dating myself right now. But at the time, like that's where all the musicians were uploading their music. So I was building this program for Thumbplay to have musicians promote Thumbplay as a service. And I was there for about a year and a half. And at the time, YouTube was just blowing up. And I had a friend who worked for a college buddy of mine who worked for a film house and a production studio in New York. And I had another friend who I wanted to start a business with. And we had this idea we knew that we have all these films that don't get seen. The internet, people might be able to get to see these videos. And so we started a website called URTV, and this website was for independent filmmakers and content creators. We said, okay, YouTube is just for like videos for dogs and skateboarding and goofy videos. And we think that people are actually going to want videos that are going to be quality, and everyone could create quality video. And this is a new TV. And so we started this company called URTV together, and we didn't know what we didn't know. Being in New York didn't have a tech scene. San Francisco was where it was. We thought that independent film at the time, we thought independent film was what people wanted, more sophisticated stuff. And in general, people don't want sophisticated stuff. They want dog cat videos, and they just want like the simple stuff. So we never got the traction that we were wanting. And it took about a year or so. I think we worked on that for a year and a half to 2 years. And that kind of just petered out. And one of the people on the team, he left and he ended up leaving, but then said he wanted to sue us because he left. It went through getting the process of having a friend who turned out to be not a friend, and turns around, he sued us. And so we went through that experience as an entrepreneur. You make sure you're papered up, and people will do things that you don't expect them to do at times. And so, you kind of like, it cut my teeth on. That is part of entrepreneurship and building a company, is that people change. And so you got to think about the worst case scenarios of human behavior, unfortunately, somewhat ahead of time, and draw out the clear lines of engagement. What does this actually look like? And what do we do in these cases? And, how can we think about the things that might go wrong? That's part one, my first entrepreneurial foray. And then after URTV, I did a little bit of consulting, but then I had another idea, which was around the text message space. And so I said, I know a lot about text messaging. And at the time, there weren't a lot of easy ways to build text messaging platforms. You had to have specific relationships in the mobile carriers and specific expertise in setting it up so you could send out the text messages on short codes. And I had that. And also, I thought that similarly, for my time at Thumbplay, I was like, musicians have a hard time getting paid. So potentially there's a way you could set up a subscription service for a musician. You could subscribe to a musician, that you would get the cash, you would subscribe on the mobile phone, you bill on your mobile phone, you could send them songs and things to your mobile phone, pre-Spotify, all these things. But the direct-to-consumer movement in music, which is now coming back around, the precursor to Patreon and all these things, it's like, oh, maybe people can just subscribe on their mobile phone. They don't have to have a credit card. You just click reply and it gets billed to your cell phone. And so that was after I shut down URTV, I started that company, which was Textingly. Set out to do that subscription model and didn't quite work. And then it was like, oh, let's do small businesses. And so I said, let's help small businesses send text messages to their customers because they do need to communicate with them. Precursor to Open Table and all these things. And so I tried, like, I literally was on, like, in New York City, knocking on, like, going into, like, little Chinese food shops, be like, hey, you want to send text messages to your customers? And, like, they were busy, people would be coming in. And that also didn't work. So there's a trend here, right? You're, like, just continuously iterating on this idea, these, like, similar ideas. You're just continuously being like, oh, maybe that'll work. This will work. Which feedback I was getting from all those people were that I don't want to necessarily send text messages to my customers, but I do want to find new customers. That's what I really want. And with that, like, we took the text message platform as the core, but then added on, at the time, it was really early in mobile advertising. We added on a mobile advertising component, started building this mobile advertising platform because we said, okay, if we can sell mobile advertising programs and text messaging programs, then what will happen is that we'll make all the money. So we built this mobile platform, and it was, again, this is technology that didn't really exist, couldn't exist. And we built this platform, and we still tried to go small business, and, like, small business is just really hard. And then I had all these companies who I worked with on the mobile when I was at Thumbplay, and they were selling the ringtones. They were direct advertisers. They were running all the ads, and they were getting commissions on making money off of ringtone subscriptions. And so I was like, oh, I have all these people who I know are willing to spend tons of money anyways on ads. And I think that I can get those people to spend money on this advertising platform because, like, it's all mobile. And so we pivoted Textingly into Decisive and renamed it. And that's how we got Decisive. And Decisive really did take off. We went from, I think it was like a couple $100,000 in annual revenue to $3 million in 12 months. And we raised money from people like Gary Vaynerchuk and Disney. And really, at the end of that, we tried to grow it. And another lesson is that at times when you're an entrepreneur, there are macro events that happen that are bigger than things that you can control. So what happened at that time was that there were two companies, a company, I don't even know if they're still around anymore. One of them was named Rocket Fuel, and they were an advertising platform similar to what we were doing, and another company called Millennial Media, and they were a mobile advertising company. And both of those companies, they IPO'd, and their IPOs didn't do well, and that put a chill on the entire market. And so we couldn't raise any more money. Monique, you know that story. We couldn't raise any more money. And as a result, we were running at a pace that we survived through that transition. And so I think that is my entrepreneurial experience. After I was running Textingly/Decisive for 7 years, and I was just tired, and it was really hard shutting down a company that you build over a long period of time. And so I just took some time off, and I traveled a little bit. I moved out of the city. I put all my stuff at my parents' place, moved back home, and just took some time to breathe and travel. And so that was really the post-Decisive. And then out of that, I really thought a lot about what I wanted to do next. And part of me was like, I'm never going to build another company. I'm never going to do anything in technology. And here I am again. But what I learned from all of that is that and I take a lot of these examples from sports, is that LeBron didn't win his first, LeBron had to go through 6 seasons of failure until he won his first championship. Jordan had to go through 6 seasons of failure until he won his first championship, until he got the right team around him, until he got the right coach around him. We don't think about that as you can't win the championship your first year. You have to go through a lot of the losses to really be able to know what the failure looks like so you can have the success. And I think that is a lot of what I've learned over the course of my career. And I think that's something that not a lot of people talk about in entrepreneur circles, or when you got to be ready to take the lumps and get back up. And so that is really and here I am working with Monique. And I think that's really that's been my journey.
Yeah, that last point is so true, is that you got to be ready to fail. Failure is inevitable when you're getting to success, and you have to be ready to learn from those failures. So what would you say that your biggest failure was, and what have you learned from it?
Yeah, I would say that certainly it decisive was, I'd say, my biggest failure, and only because the higher you fly, the higher the potential if you fall, right? It scaled. We turned down a couple buyout offers at the time. We just had a great team. The team really believed it, great investors who really believed in us. And the hardest part is when you don't have any other options. It's just looking at your team and the people who believe in you and just saying, we're out of time, we're out of gas. And I think also the thing about being an entrepreneur is that your identity is so tied up in your work. It's like, it's important to separate them, but it's really hard to separate them. And at the time, there was a lot of ego and a lot of, I'm so awesome because of all these awesome things that are happening. And then that it gets taken away from you or it goes away. And then you have to look at yourself, and you have to, at least I had to take inventory of who am I and why did this failure happen and how can I be better next time? And so I think that was like the biggest failure, but also out of that failure, a lot of the things that I decided after that came from it. And so a lot of the growth, a lot of ego, a lot of wanting to, after everything is lost, you want to reclaim something. And I wanted to share a lot of the lessons and support other entrepreneurs and help them, even if Decisive was gone. Yeah, how could I take those lessons and share them with other people? So I would say that was the hardest failure, I'd say, for sure, because it's almost like a death, right? If somebody in your life passes away, you can't get that back. You have an undo button for most things in life, right? And that's one of those things where it doesn't feel like you can undo it. And I think that's the hardest part about those things.
So fast forwarding back to your work at YGN, what would you say you have taken from all these experiences, and what are you bringing to YGN?
Yeah, I think we've always talked about YGN as you were working on it, building it, and we teamed up really 3 to 4 years ago now. It was 2000. It was right around COVID. A lot of people were buying the wraps. You had the bones of your production team in place. And really, I had experience in marketing. So I was running the influencer agency, and so knew a lot about that. And I was working with Brian, going back to the guy I hired at Thumbplay, I was working with him and I worked with him on, we work with brands, right? And you said, I think I have something, can we see where it goes? And the combination of an amazing product and a product market fit and some data and some expertise really is what pushed YGN forward. And having a great production team on the ground as well, all those pieces came together to be something that was really special and really unique. And I think at that point, I realized that general marketing awareness, view into how other companies were building brands in 2020. And I think that was initially what I brought. But then as we started to think about fundraising, it was, in our first round of fundraising, it was oh, this is interesting, and people are raising money around direct-to-consumer brands. And I had relationships and I had raised money at Decisive. So I felt oh, I think we can raise some money around this. And that was part two. If this is really a unique product in the market, then you should raise money because it will give you a shot to take the business to the next level. And so that experience of having raised money, even though I haven't raised through multiple rounds in Decisive, I was able to bring that to the table. And now it's just more understanding negotiation, understanding kind of big picture of where people are coming from. Now, fortunately, I have a decent network that I can bring to YGN. And then just if there's anything, maybe a counterbalance to, obviously we think very differently. So a counterbalance to, not always that useful of a counterbalance, but somewhat of a counterbalance to the way you think. And I think those are the things that I probably bring to YGN that are valuable. And then just in general, having managed teams, just thinking about, okay, what do people need? that's something that I try to think about, but we have a lot of people who are thinking about what people need at YGN. I think that's it.
Awesome. It's been really good talking about your background today. What do you want to talk about on the next episode?
There are a lot of products that have stories behind them, and they're really exciting and interesting. You're the lead designer, and you've designed most of the products that we have at YGN. And so I'd love to talk specifically about the swim turbine, because that product is just so unique, and how you thought of it and how you went about bringing it to life, and where you think it fits into YGN. So I'd love to dig into the story of the swim turbine.
Looking forward to it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. And if there are any questions you guys have, send them into on our social media, on YouTube, or we should set up a podcast at YG.YouGoNatural.com.
Call it Nature of the Business at YouGoNatural.com.
What is it?
Nature of the Business at YouGoNatural.com.
Cool. So if you have any questions, you want us to talk about anything next week, email us at natureofthebusiness@YouGoNatural.com. Thanks so much, guys.